Hello, everybody, and thanks for listening. I really appreciate the comments and the well wishes and the people who have been really supportive of my channel, and those people who are pretty neutral. They don't take things real personal to the extent to where they feel like someone is talking directly at them in a negative fashion. A lot of times I try to do videos that are based on real news articles or real opinions, and or they could be some things that could have been a part of historical content, um, urban issues, black issues, people issues. So I try to stick to things that are subjects or topics people have prior knowledge of, or they can relate to for whatever context that it is. Now, I said in a previous video that I was going to talk about this dreaded thing called race, and I have in other videos I have mentioned some of the reasons why some people feel the way that they do. It may not be the feelings of everyone, but there are a large numbers of people who can relate to some of the content that I have expressed, some of the feelings, primarily African American people that are U.S. citizens who have been here all their life feel a lot of uneasiness when it comes to how the police handle situations when it involves African American people or people of color, and the government, how it handles situations when it involves people from different backgrounds and ethnic groups, and also the law system, the judicial system, how it handles situations involving people who are African American and who have issues with law or legal issues and what have you. There's a lot of breakdown and distrust because of prior incidences that have happened in the past year and more recent, involving a lot of shootings of unarmed African American males, females, African American people being targeted. And I think there's a lot of issues that are still in play, and they just seem to never really end. They only evolve into new issues, but the same reasons. It all ends up being because of someone's bias, someone's prejudice, or someone's racial view of how they see someone else as maybe beneath them or inferior, or they feel that other people don't have rights and maybe a particular group is afforded rights and others aren't. So I feel like a lot of it really is, it's not just only a personal thing. I feel like it has a lot to do with the system of government and who's running it and who's in control of it. And I know this is probably familiar to some people, or maybe most people, but I feel like whoever is in power, whoever has the most, how would you say, influence over a large numbers of people, is the one that basically calls the shots as to how things are going to go, whether they're fair or unfair or partial, in between. um, I feel like a lot of it comes from competition as well. um, and I do think it has to do with the Darwinism and what people have been taught. that mentality of surviving another group of people and thriving and being on top of others, and then there's the combination of people that are greedy and they want everything for themselves and they don't want to share with other people. So that's the reason why you get the issues that you do, like right now the people are faced with, where they don't want to share with other groups when it comes to, good housing, um, being able to have a good job and a nice life, home life, having opportunities that come easier to you based on whatever the criterion. It's not even, you don't have to even really be that educated, just be a particular ethnic group or be someone who has a lot of money. It just seems like even now too, it's getting to the point to where if you can't afford certain things, then you're going to be left behind. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with always what color you are, what race you are, but what your money can buy and how far it will take you in today's world. And that's what it feels like that this time is going into. It's like you could be a black person and have all these issues that come against you, but if you can buy your way out of a situation, you're better off than someone who can't pay for certain ways to go about getting in a school or getting in a particular position at a job. It's just seems like it's getting to that point where it's about the haves and the have-nots. And I've said that before in a previous video. It feels as though that we're evolving into like an issue having to do with class. And the race thing is still in there. I feel like people get used and pitted against one another. And I feel like one group here in America that is usually put against one another are Hispanics and blacks. And I feel like what happens is one group thinks they're better than the other because they're looked at a different way, or they're viewed a different way, or they have a higher percentage, so to speak, or a certain percentage of um, European bloodline. And then others feel that if you're darker or if you're further away from the European um, phenotypical type look, blue eyes, blonde hair, or just being white, if you don't look or appear that way, you could have like a family member or a mother or a father, but if your other parent is black and you look or appear to be more black, some people feel like that's a problem. Um, and I feel like some people, all they do is they race bait, and then they use that as a vehicle to try to put people down for how they look or what they have or possess or what they think they have that's better than someone else. And so I feel like that's what has been going on, and it just never really ends. It gets worse as time goes by. It always comes back and repeats itself, and I feel like the race debates won't really end, because I feel like a lot of it has been fueled. It's not just people in general, local people and people who don't have power. I feel like it's the people that have more of the power that are the ones that help to fuel a lot of the social divides among different people. And that's the reason why we have all the fighting over who's got jobs, who doesn't have jobs, and who has better housing, and who has better this and better that, and better schooling, education, and and all the whole thing down the list. And I don't think it will really ever end, because as long as you have people who they say that they're not racist, and a lot of times you got to be careful about people who say that, because they are. Everybody has some types of bias somewhere or prejudice about something. Even I do, honestly. And I'm not afraid to admit that, because we're all human and we're not perfect and we have different opinions about issues, and some of it is valid and some of it is just maybe we've had some bad experiences based on some of those issues. A lot of it is political or incidental. Sometimes it isn't isolated. If you have more than 20 people from the same background complaining about the same issue, then it probably isn't an isolated event. It's not just one person complaining. So, like, it would be stupid for me to say, for example, oh, immigration is not really affecting immigrants. It's just an isolated incident. It just happened to a couple of people in the neighborhood. It's not happening to everyone. That would be dumb of me to say that, knowing that it is happening to a larger number of than 2 and 3 people. So it's the same thing, using that as the scenario and the analogy to say to a black person, oh, there's no race warring, there's no color bias at the jobs and discrimination. That's not really happening to black people. And then you've got like 30 or 40 black people having similar incidences. It's just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean that it isn't happening. So maybe you're from a different culture or background. That doesn't mean that it isn't happening. It's just not happening to you because you happen to not be of the black culture. So we get that a lot, where people will look at you sideways and they say, oh, that's not happening. That's not really the case. Oh, I'm not racist. We'll have people that'll say things like that, but then they turn around and do things that show they are racist. Like, they don't want to do anything without, mentioning certain things that might be offensive to an African American person of color. They have to mention it as if, oh, it's not going to be offensive to her. Like, I know this one lady who was telling me she had a dear friend, and, or so to speak, dear friend, and I take it this person was white, and she said the person spoke of Obama in a way where it wasn't even about politics. It had nothing to do with what they disliked about maybe a law that he created, or what he took away, or what he started, or anything having to do with maybe health care, anything. It was more like about just him as a black person. And the words that she was saying was really, really, really harsh in terms of people of color. Yet her friend was a person of color, and so she said she stopped talking to her on Facebook and she unfriended her, and from that point on, that ended the relationship. She was friends with this woman for a number of years, and she assumed that because the woman had, I guess, knew her for a number of years, that, okay, you know me, I'm a black person, you're a white person, so all those stereotypes should diminish. But yet, all of the years, or the number of years that she had invested knowing this woman, she comes up saying some things that were really, really scathing about people of African American descent. And this woman was really hurt by that. And so it kind of makes you feel like, are people not really being honest? You know, I would say if it's somebody at work, you might want to wait before you call them a friend, because you really don't know what they're really saying behind your back. Maybe at work they're pretending to be someone that you assume they are, but when they're off the clock, you don't know who they're around. You don't know what kind of activity they're involved in and what types of things they're saying. And I always say this: if you see a person and you don't ever see anybody of any other culture going to visit them, and it's always like, for example, for a black person, there are always only black people visiting. There's only black people talking to this person. They never have a white person come visit. They never have a person that is Asian come visit. They don't have any friends of any other culture. It's just all one culture. There might be an issue with that individual, where you might assume that because of the lack of exposure to other cultures, that there's a possible chance that they could be prejudiced or racist. So it's just maybe a small sign. And then when you hear them talk, and then you, all they talk about is how they hate this person and hate that person or whatever. So, and it could be gender. Maybe I hate women because they do this, or I hate men because they do that, or whatever. So it's just, those could be, there could be a lot of things behind it too. Maybe they had a couple of bad experiences, maybe more than a couple of bad experiences. But the way this world works, it almost puts people in those situations where it drags people in those race debates or those wars, where they become verbal and then it becomes physical and it becomes personal later down the road. So I feel like that's what's been going on. And there has been a lot of things that have happened to certain people of different backgrounds. So maybe somebody that you run into had a personal experience that was really bad, and they just never were able to heal from it. And as a black person, I would say there has been a lot of things that I've experienced personally that has caused me to, I'll say this, not trust right away people that aren't black. And I'll be honest with you, because of some of the bad experiences, the discrimination and the racism. And that is probably more of what I would, use my prior knowledge to, rather than just write off saying, oh, that person's going to be bad, that person's. It takes me time to figure out what the person is about. Some people are warm and sincere about certain things, and then others you just feel like they're not really sincere, that there's a hidden agenda, that they're standoffish, they don't really want to converse with you, and they act kind of reluctant to have a full conversation, and then if it is, it's not really genuine. And so you get these vibes that the individual may not be, that used to being around people who are not of the same background. Sometimes it's experimental. Maybe they're trying to figure a person out because they haven't had the exposure. Then other times they've heard all these stereotypes in their household about people, and they've never really actually had real life experiences to judge someone else, to feel like, oh, I got to be afraid of this person, I was robbed. They just automatically assume that if they get in the elevator with somebody of color, they have to clutch their purse and watch you, because of what they heard on the news, or what they heard on Bill O'Reilly, or what they had a neighbor that, expressed some really not so nice, information about something that they could have maybe made up. Or maybe they did have an experience and it was bad, and it happened to be a person of that background, but that doesn't mean everybody you come across is going to do the same thing. So that's the kind of things that I've noticed. It feels like when you read certain things in the news, it kind of fuels the fire. And then when you have these hate groups, and I saw this article The article, it says it's okay to be white, how Fox News is helping to spread neo-Nazism and propaganda, and it's by Michael Edison Hayden in Newsweek. It just came out, so some of you probably read it or you didn't even pay any attention to it, so it doesn't mean anything. But it's a lot of reading, but I'll just read a little bit. It says it was a Friday night in the early November, and Fox News host Tucker Carlson was preaching to the camera about leftists showing racial divisions throughout America. So, reacting to an article in the Washington Post about a principal at a Maryland high school investigating an incident in which someone posted flyers proclaiming it's okay to be white, Carlson claimed to see evidence of an anti-white agenda at play in the Post report. So, the segment was typical Fox News fodder, but with an exception. Carlson was pushing forward a meme promoting by white supremacists, and he was doing so exactly as they had intended him to do it. Being white, by the way, is not something you can control, Carlson said to the camera in the priggish tone. Like an ethnicity, you're born with it. Like any ethnicity, you are born with it. Which is why you shouldn't attack people for it, and yet the left does constantly, in case you haven't noticed. And so it goes on, so it probably says a lot more. So there's a hashtag going around on Twitter saying hashtag it's okay to be white campaign. So it is organized by the neo-Nazis. See what they are saying in their own chat rooms about it. It's all smoke screen for their broader agenda and more violence. So there's like a flyer and it's on Twitter and it says hashtag it's okay to be white. So they're pushing a lot of propaganda. So I will put the title of the article and then you can skim through it. But these are the type of things that have been happening in this time with people of color not feeling very secure about people who are white, because you don't know if your boss is a part of the neo-Nazi group, then when you talk about the NFL and them kneeling, and then that incident when the Veterans Day came, everybody stood and they bring this huge flag out, and this was just after people had uncovered the original anthem of patriotism, that it had a lot of racial slur and a lot of racial bias and a lot of racism in it. And so I guess by somebody, maybe they read a lot of that and heard the original national anthem. It made some people angry. So they said, no, we're going to have a even bigger flag at the NFL game. So you can see what the mindset of some people, or more than some people, is. And so that's what makes people do these videos. That's what makes people feel uneasy and uncomfortable about people, because you don't know which ones to trust. And then you have people from your own culture who also support some of these groups. They may not be hate groups, but they're hate groups in a different fashion where they are self-haters. And so you don't even trust people who look like you. So it's gotten really, that's where I said it's evolved, the hate. And so it's a scary time that we live in, and you just gotta live the best way you can despite all of the craziness. And it just seems like it's imploding. But with that being said, I really don't believe that it ever really will end because of all of the things that have been put out. And now we have a new group of people doing it. It was the younger generation where they were living in the household of Bill O'Reilly listeners. And so right when people were saying, oh, Obama was elected, you had a black president, it's post-racial, there's no more race issues anyway. It just seemed to even trigger more hate. So, and then they blamed it on Obama, and now it's really being blamed on Trump because of all of the stuff that's been going on. So it's like, and I will say this too. I wasn't really a big fan. There's other things I'm not a big fan of, but I kind of feel like the social programs that they put out to help people of certain groups and then push other groups out fuel the fight between different cultures. And so it feels unfair when you say to one group, okay, we're going to help you with school, we're going to help you with housing, we're going to help you with all these things. And here you got people who have been here all their lives. And if they even ask for any of those things, they get questioned to death. You have to write a book, sign your life away, and then they cut this program, they cut that program from you. And so these are the types of issues that happen. And then when you have a group that they didn't come here the way your people came here, by force, and then you put these groups against one another, I feel like government kind of has a fault in that, and more so than just the people. They're gonna, as a person, if you feel like, oh, it's gonna benefit you, you're gonna go for it. You're not gonna question whether it's legal, whether it was right or fair, if it's gonna help you feed your family, because you don't have any other options. You Except you could do things the right way, but if it's gonna give you that extra push over someone else, because human wise we think on instinct of survival. So even if it means, okay, well, sorry, but we have to eat too, so that's the mindset of people. So but I feel like it's not fair, because if you shut the door on another group that's been here and open the door for someone else who they didn't go through the necessary, you know, legal channels to do what they needed to do to validate their stays, it's like unfair. Okay, so you guys don't have the job. We don't like you. We don't like black people, but we're going to let this group come in and have this benefit and that benefit. And we're going to help them with schooling and all this. And here we can't get the same thing. It's not fair. What you do, I feel like, with one group, you should do with all. Don't leave other people out. So that makes me wonder if it's set up that way to create the division between people and to cause the fighting and to cause the social divide. And people don't see it that way. They think, oh, we're better than you. That's the way their mind's thinking. Well, we're not black, we're better than you. And it's like, you're not legal, so you don't see us saying anything about that, but now we are, and so here we are. So this is the thing, it's unfair. If you're going to be doing something for one group of people, do it for everyone the same way. Don't treat one person like they have some kind of seniority or favoritism over the next person because you don't like them, because you're biased and prejudiced. And these are our bosses. I'll be honest, these are the people that we have to go to work with and deal with every day. And they don't say anything about how they hate blacks, but they show how they hate you by the way they treat you at work. And we know what that is. We can feel it. And so I know I'm going through something similar right now. And we do everything we can to go back to school, to take a test, to get out of that position, to get out of there for good, because we don't want to hassle with them anymore. Because we know we can't get them fired, because you don't have that kind of power to do that. They should have been fired a long time ago for a lot of things that they've been doing that are not following the rules. that are biased, that are racist, all the things that are outlined under there. We don't discriminate, blah, blah, blah. And applications, they do all of that and the above. It's the opposite. Trust me. That's the one time I tell you to trust me. They are doing that. They're doing everything they say they're not doing, that they're fair. No, that's not true. Some of these jobs are not fair. They don't always follow their own rules. And they do, like, they'll have like one or two black people working there, and they're fighting to keep their job, and they won't tell on anybody because they're afraid they're going to lose that piece of job because there is nothing else right at the moment. And so this is what we're faced with. And then you see, when you go into the neighborhoods where there are black people, you see homeless black people, a lot of homeless population, and who knows where they were a couple of years ago, and now they're outdoors with no place to go. So it's like, that's what, well, at least that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. And I'm not laughing to say it's funny. It's just, it's not a funny situation, it's a sad situation, and this is the kind of thing that is going on. And I feel like they like to see, they as in, I don't know if it's people in power in government or people who are just straight up racist individuals, they love seeing people of color not have anything, basically, and just out there on the street struggling. They don't like to see you have a nice car. They don't want you living in their neighborhoods next to them. If you live next to them, they're watching everything you do, everything you say, something you do, it's got to be something wrong with it. If it's different than theirs, it's, you're judged on every level. And you can't just be like a normal individual that's trying to live and trying to work and feed your family just like they're doing. No, it's got to be something, some kind of drama. Oh, what's she gonna do now? Oh, what's she gonna do now? Ooh, who is that going in the house? Ooh, who's coming out? That kind of stuff. And so this is the kind of stuff, or ooh, what job? And then when you go to the job, there's drama there. So it's like, oh, okay, what she got? What's her opinion? Ooh, we don't want to hear that. So you have no voice and you have no defense. So this is the way we people of color, a lot of times, there's a lot of us that do get treated that way. Like, you don't count. What your opinions are, they don't count. You see the way it is in the news, some of that, where they people, I don't want to hear Black lives don't matter. It's all lives. It's white lives that matter. So that kind of stuff. So this is where we're at. And so with that being said, I just wanted to say that that's my take on the whole thing. I don't think race will ever really end, the race debating rather, because you just have new people that do it. It just, every year it just changes. Might be a different thing. Now, what I do notice that's different that has happened this year, that would be a whole nother video, is that women are being more vocal about their sexual harassment, which was something that people did not want to talk about. So, and everybody is coming out of every crack and crevice that you can think of, and they're coming out with, oh, he touched me, he did this, and so it's just letting all the ugly come out of what has been swept under the rug. And I think, like I said, it could not just be the race thing, it could also be the gender thing, where women, their voice is not heard either. Well, until now, of course, I will say, I think actually they're doing a lot more. There's a lot more advancement in women's speaking out than dealing with, black issues. I guess that just seems like it'll never really be resolved. And so that's why, whenever an incident comes up or a protest, people highlight it and look at it and they're like, okay, well, moving along. It's just never been resolved. I think that's, like how they say a cold case, you're never going to find any resolve to that issue. It's just going to stay there and linger and fester. It might change over time, but it's still the same issue. different people looking at it. It's old. It's the oldest debate that never dies and never gets resolved. So with that being said, I'd like to say thank you for listening. I appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. Bye.